Hi guys, today I'm going to be talking about the Sony A7R IV and 7 reasons why I think this is the perfect camera. And I'm going to start right now. What's up guys, Photo Fever here and welcome back to the channel. So today we're all talking about the Sony A7R IV. Now this camera's been out for a while now and I've just got around to start using it. I've pretty much been using it since around about the start of the year, and I must say I've really got on with it. I've predominantly been using Canon for the most part, so this is the first time of me properly using a Sony camera, and I must say it is amazing. So today I'm going to be talking about the 7 main reasons why I absolutely love using this camera for professional photography use, and I've predominantly used it for landscape and portrait photography. So with that out of the way guys, let's get started. So the first reason is the resolution. Now this sensor is a brand new sensor by Sony. So it's a 61 megapixel full frame CMOS sensor. And I must say this is a massive upgrade to pretty much anything I've used before. The most high megapixel camera I've ever used is the Canon EOS R, which is a 30 megapixel full frame camera. So this is a massive upgrade, pretty much double the resolution. But it isn't just the resolution I really like, it's also the dynamic range. A lot of the cameras I use has around 13 stops of dynamic range. That's what the Canon EOS R has, and that's predominantly my main camera. But this has 15, so the actual dynamic range of every photo I take has really good depth, colour, and I must say the overall resolution of the image really does shine through. Now I do a lot of landscape and portrait work, and that requires quite a lot of cropping, and usually with the Canon that I use I can crop in around 30% without losing most of the resolution of the photo. But with the Sony I was able to crop in way further, and it gives me a lot more creative freedom of where I can crop and the aspect ratios and stuff. So I must say using a very high resolution camera really does have its advantages. Now obviously it does have disadvantages as well, and I've actually got a video just here talking about the reality of shooting with a 61 megapixel camera. But if you like cropping and you really like the resolution and especially the dynamic range, you're going to absolutely love this Sony. So that's my main reason why I think it is a truly amazing camera. So the second reason why I think this is a really good camera is all to do with the IBIS, or in-body image stabilization. Now I've come from a camera, the Canon EOS R, that doesn't have any IBIS. And I got on with it. It wasn't too bad, but going to a camera that does was truly amazing. I must say it is so much cleaner at lower shutter speeds. I could pretty much get away, especially with this Zeiss lens that I've got here that also has image stabilization. I could get away with pretty much shooting a second handheld without having too much motion blur. And that's saying something with a really high megapixel camera such as this Sony. So having really high megapixels and having that OS system is really handy to have. And I must say, I don't hear a lot of people talking about it. 5.5 stops is incredibly high, and it's actually 1 stop higher than the A7 III. So having image stabilization, especially in body, really truly does help when you're wanting to create less shaky motion blur photos, especially at lower shutter speeds. Especially if you're doing any macro work, if you're doing any indoor work with flashes, having that ability to have sharper images is really handy. So moving on to point 3 is all about image stabilization. Now I've already discussed it in point 2, but what is really handy with the image stabilization, it creates a pixel shift mode. Now how pixel shift works is it takes 4, 8 or 16 photos, and it uses the image stabilization to move the sensor and take a photo. And it can take up to 16 photos and then blur them all together to create a truly high megapixel photo. This can end up being a 280 megapixel photo if you use 16 photos and overlay them. Now you are going to need special software to actually blend them all together, and you are going to make sure that there isn't any large amount of movement in the photo, otherwise you can get these weird ghosting effects appear. But if you're doing any landscape work, or if you're doing anything architecture-wise, maybe if you're indoors shooting maybe a Colosseum or something like that, this truly is an amazing camera to use. So make sure if you are using the pixel shift mode, make sure you've got it on a tripod and make sure there isn't too many moving subjects. A few you might be able to get away with, but not too many. Like waterfalls and water, I'd probably stay away from, especially leaves. I really struggled with leaves. So if you are after a camera that can shoot truly amazing megapixels, 280, that's medium format. That is really, really high megapixels. Then the Sony A7R IV is definitely a camera you should have in your camera bag. So my next point is all about the autofocus. Now, Sony are pretty much the world leaders in this autofocus technology. Canon have caught up recently with the new Canon EOS R5 and R6, but this is pretty much 2 years younger than those cameras. So this really does show you how good Sony are with their eye and animal autofocus. I must say the lock-on eye tracking and face tracking is truly amazing, and it made my photos so much easier and sharper when it comes to using portrait photography. I must say locking onto the eye and just snapping and just keeping it there is so much easier to use than finding the autofocus point and then recomposing using my Canon camera. Now the Canon EOS R does have eye autofocus, but I must say this camera is truly amazing when it comes to that capability. So if you're interested in using it for studio portraits or even just general environmental portraits, then this camera is going to be perfect for you. And I must say, just give it a go and see if you get on with it, because I must say, from a Canon user, I really like that feature. So my next point is all about the redesigned body. Now, this redesigned body has actually come from the previous A7R III. Now, that camera was actually designed on the A7 III. So you can see that the camera actually hasn't been redesigned up for several years. So this camera was a big design upgrade from the previous camera. And I must say they have done a really, really good job. The grip is a lot larger and all the buttons are a lot easier to function and actually press. And some of them have even got locking pins to prevent you from moving it by accidentally. Now, I think this is a large upgrade from the A7 III. I found that incredibly small, and that camera actually put me off buying Sony cameras in general. Because of how small the cameras were, I just felt it was a little bit too small for my hands. But using the Sony A7R IV has definitely changed my mind. The size of the actual grip itself and all the buttons make it feel a lot more premium, but easier to hold as well, especially if you've got larger hands such as myself. So if you're after a new camera, especially a camera such as this, and you're after one with more of a larger body, but still a fairly small form factor, then the Sony A7R IV is going to be perfect. And even if you couple it with a lot of the Zeiss lenses, it really is well balanced. I must say the Zeiss lenses really do fit well with the Sony bodies. So I think this is an overall great design, especially if you're wanting a smaller body, but still great quality. So my next point is all about the electronic viewfinder. Now, Sony's rear screen is terrible, and I think they could do a lot better job with the next iteration of this camera. I don't rely on the rear screen to really review any of my photos. What I do is actually look it through the EVF. And that is a truly amazing EVF, and I wish they'd added this EVF on a lot of other Sony cameras. This EVF is really, really high resolution, and it really makes all the small details a lot easier to read, especially when you're using it for, let's say, portrait photography, and you want to nail the focus on that eye. You can actually spot the eye using the EVF because of how high resolution it is. It is a 5.76 million dot EVF, which is way higher than the Sony A7 III and also the Canon EOS R or pretty much any other mirrorless camera I know to date. So if you're after a really crisp EVF and it was actually really easy to review your images afterwards without relying on the LCD screen at the back, then I would say this camera is really good for you. I must say I really enjoyed using, this is the first camera I ever used with an EVF. I've predominantly used DSLRs in the past, and this has really changed my mind on how EVFs work. It's so much easier to nail that exposure and nail that sharpness, especially with the high resolution of the EVF in the Sony A7R IV. So last, but I think most importantly, is actually the lens choices of Sony. Now, Sony have been around for a while now, especially in the mirrorless system. So they have got a very large catalogue of lenses out there, and they're bringing out pretty much lenses almost, I swear, every single week. They've only just released 3 new prime lenses for the Sony E-mount, the full frame version. And again, you've also got Zeiss, you've got Tamron, you've got Sigma, and then you've got a lot of the G Master lenses. Now, I personally think Zeiss, especially coupled with a high megapixel camera such as this Sony A7R IV, is the best balance. I find Zeiss lenses are by far the sharpest lenses I've tested, and I find they complement this camera really, really well. Again, having the best performing glass, especially with high megapixels, will give you the best outcome and the best sharpness. If you go ahead and put a crappy lens on the front, especially with a high resolution camera, you really are wasting that resolution. So I'd definitely look into getting a few Zeiss lenses, such as this Zeiss 40mm, or even the 85mm, or even the 135mm. Those lenses are unbelievably and exquisitely sharp. So I would definitely say they complement the Sony A7R IV really well. But again, you've got a lot more budget orientated lenses out there. I know Sigma create a great selection of lenses like the 35mm f1.2. They've just released a brand new Sony G Master 50mm f1.2. So they've got a great selection of professional prime lenses and a great selection of pro zoom lenses, as well as some more budget orientated lenses out there as well. So if you're looking for a camera brand to really invest in, then Sony is a really good camera brand to go with. Now Canon, I grant you, are releasing a lot of pro cameras out there, but again, they're a little bit behind, especially Sony, that have been in the mirrorless system for at least the last 5 years. So I definitely recommend Sony, especially the Sony A7R IV, for the lens choices that you have. They have so many to choose from. It really is a good idea to invest in a camera brand that has a great selection of lenses. Brilliant, and there we go guys. So there are my 7 reasons why I think the Sony A7R IV is the best camera out there in 2021. Now obviously there are different photographers out there and this isn't necessarily designed for every single photographer. But for me personally, I think this is an amazing camera. And let me know down in the comments if you've owned one or wanting to own the Sony A7R IV, especially if you use any of the Zeiss class. These are all the ones that I've been testing recently. I have fallen in love with the resolution of this camera and the sharpness of the lens. They really do complement each other really well. So write down in the comments if you agree or disagree with any of my points there. Again guys, if you want to like, comment and subscribe to my channel, it really does help my channel grow. Also guys, if you want to hit the bell notification so you don't miss any of my latest content. But until next time guys, keep creating.